Today, I want to talk about the evolution of social enterprise, how we're going from not-for-profit foundations to social enterprises have the ability to not only sustain their business, but also scale their operations. I'm going to start unpacking the differences between not-for-profits and also social enterprises. But first, I want to ask you a question. What's your calling? What's your cause? What's your passion? Everybody has one. Could be clean water or some other social injustice. Think about that, and if you're ready to get started, I hope I can give you some ideas to think about that'll take you from here to there. In the United States, the most common approach to attack a social injustice of some type is to start a not-for-profit foundation, and many people do, devoting a significant amount of time and energy to resolving that issue. There's no question, and it's absolutely true, that they do good work and they have a significant impact. One of the issues that comes into play is sustainability of that not-for-profit foundation. Some of those foundations have been around for decades, like the United Way. They've done a great job. But for most not-for-profit foundations, the sustainability comes into play because of funding. The funding through donations is not consistent. It takes a lot of hard work and dedication and time to raise money to keep that foundation going. And it takes away from the time and energy and the focus on the cause. One of the things that, though, is absolutely true about not-for-profit foundations is the ability to scale those operations. It is very, very tough. And why is that? Well, it's absolutely straightforward. That is the inconsistency of funding, because you're always trying to raise money in the form of donations. And without a consistent stream of funding going into a not-for-profit foundation, there's no way to scale that operation. So, and if there's no mission or there's no money, there is no mission. So what I'd like to do now is to switch gears and talk about the business side of social impact. I'm going to talk today about two social enterprises and their models. And they have something that they are able to do some things that not-for-profit foundations absolutely cannot do, and that is scale their operations. The first one I'm going to talk about is Tom's Shoes. I think everybody's familiar with Tom's, and they're one-for-one model. Buy a pair of Tom's shoes, and they'll give a pair of Tom's shoes to another under-resourced child around the world. From a corporate structure standpoint, they are a pure for-profit corporation with a philanthropic purpose of giving shoes to under-resourced children around the world. So they dedicate a small portion of their profit to accomplishing that goal. That is what we call, or what I call, social enterprise 1.0. The next example that I like to talk about is a social enterprise that's actually based right here in DuPage County. It is called Tyndale House Publishing. It is a book publisher. It has a synergistic not-for-profit foundation called the Tyndale Foundation. And the reason why this is so unique is the not-for-profit foundation owns a significant portion of the for-profit company. So they work synergistically. So the uniqueness is that the foundation gets a steady stream of income in the form of dividends. And that's very different. Most foundations are driven by donations. This one, again, gets a steady stream of dividends, and that changes the whole game for the not-for-profit foundation. That means that it's not only sustainable, that it's scalable. So as Tyndale House Publishing publishes more books and becomes more profitable, the foundation also grows without donations. And that is a very, very unique model. So how do you tell the difference between these two types of social enterprises? Well, one way to do it relatively straightforwardly and simply is to look at their exit strategy. Normal businesses, when they're looking to basically exit, they usually do one of two things. They either sell their company or they potentially go public for a small group. And that's what Tom's Shoes has done recently when they sold half their company to Bain Capital for $300 million. So when they've done that, now that philanthropic purpose goes beyond just the founder, Blake McCoskey, and starts to be involved the other investors in that decision. And you start to wonder whether that philanthropic purpose will continue. On the other hand, when you look at Tyndale House Publishing and also the Tyndale House Foundation, they've continued to publish books, and also the foundation continues to do good work based on their vision and mission. And they've done that for over 5 decades. They are still focused on their commitment to publishing and also the commitment of the foundation. But I think their authenticity as it is at a different level. And it's not just about the profit and the dollars that flow into the for-profit. It's the structure of a not-for-profit and a for-profit working together. And because of that structure, it keeps them independent and successful and looking at the long term. And in my opinion, that is impressive. So what I'd like to do now is to turn to our hybrid organization, which we basically looked at the Tyndale Foundation model and used it as our example. So our for-profit company is OWP Pharmaceuticals, and our not-for-profit foundation is the ROW Foundation. Please watch the video.
We've all heard of one-for-one social enterprises. Companies that give something to a person in need for every one you buy. A pair of shoes, glasses, toothbrushes, even gluten-free muffins. But the one industry we never expected this to have been possible is the pharmaceutical industry. It just seems too regulated, complex, and at the bottom line, if the drug itself isn't of the highest quality, it doesn't matter who gets it anyway. OWP Pharmaceuticals is a new spin on Big Pharma, making it possible to provide the same standard of epilepsy treatment to the entire world. When it comes to treating patients with epilepsy, neurologists consider 3 things: efficacy, safety, and cost. A mind without fear. Isn't that the goal? That the right drug, at the right time, in the right dose, would contain the storm, control the seizures, leaving the patient and their loved ones with a mind without fear. OWP Pharma is epilepsy focused. Our entire line of branded generic drugs is designed to treat this single disorder. Secondly, is the drug safe? Is it high quality? With every refill, you can expect a consistent medication every day, every week, every month. And thirdly is cost. With all the fogginess surrounding healthcare costs, OWP Pharma offers straightforward pricing. All our epilepsy brands are priced at $120 for 90 days of therapy. It couldn't get much simpler. While all this might sound similar to other leading brands, this is where OWP's business model separates itself. We believe that what counts in life is not the mere fact that we have lived. It is what difference we have made in the lives of others. Epilepsy is a global problem, and it deserves a global solution. Where we live, most people with epilepsy have their seizures controlled with medication, but the rest of the world will not receive the same regular treatment we have available to us. And for many of them, the cultural stigma attached to the illness is more difficult to deal with than the disorder itself. Children with epilepsy may be banned from school, and adults even barred from marriage. So yes, we've all heard of social enterprises, but OWP Pharma has navigated the red tape of the pharmaceutical industry, transferring profits to its strategic partner, the Roe Foundation, which carries a first world standard of treatment to those suffering from epilepsy in the rest of the world. Through this foundation, neurologists from the developed world partner in the training of practitioners on the ground, increasing their ability to diagnose epilepsy when it would not have been otherwise, and providing the tools and medications needed to treat the stigma-causing symptoms that would have otherwise been untreated. By simply making a shift to supporting OWP branded generic drugs, patients in the developed world can become advocates for one standard of epilepsy treatment around the world, and the patients who use them turn every prescription they buy into treatment not just for themselves, but for another patient in another corner of the world. Join us and add your fingerprint. One world, one standard. OWP Pharmaceuticals.
I spent 11 years with Abbott Laboratories and 16 years with Bristol Myers Squibb and 2 years as a pharmaceutical consultant. Spent most of that time working with large pharmaceutical companies and startups. It became apparent to me very, very quickly that the majority of time, energy, and effort by Big Pharma is focused on the wealthy countries like the United States, Canada, UK, Japan, and the wealthy countries of the EU. And in this bar graph, you can see that that showed up in the data as well. The very little sales come from ROW, or rest of world. It's not really a surprise when I found this out. When you really think about these companies, they are publicly held. They're driven by profits. Their stakeholders and their shareholders want you to maximize profits. So they spend time and energy in those countries that have significant wealth and also a very well-organized healthcare machine and a healthcare system. So it's not really that much of a surprise, but it is disappointing. Unfortunately, if you happen to have epilepsy and you live in a low or middle income country, the likelihood that you're going to receive these life-giving and life-changing medications as you do in the United States is just not there. This is the medical and pharmaceutical injustice that really drove us to start this organization. The treatment gap in Ghana, for example, is 90%. That means 9 out of 10 patients, actually, I can't even really say they're patients. There are people with epilepsy that are technically not patients, are not diagnosed nor treated in Ghana. And for the lucky 10% that are, they're usually given very old drugs like phenobarbital and phenytoin. Those drugs are over 70 years old. The drugs that are available in the United States, even the generic and affordable drugs, are not available to people in Ghana. This medical and pharmaceutical injustice drove us to create our mantra, one world, one standard. And we started to think about how could we create a financially sustainable model that would be scalable and we could impact people with epilepsy around the world. Now, a few facts and figures about epilepsy. These are all from the World Health Organization. There are 50 million patients living with epilepsy around the world. So 20% of those live in wealthy countries, again, like the United States, Japan, Canada, etc., are 10 million. But 40 million people, or 80%, live in low and middle income countries. So the majority of people live in the areas where they can't get access to the medications they need that can change their lives. According to published clinical research in wealthy countries like the United States, where patients get diagnosed and they get treated, we know that 70% of those patients can have their seizures reduced significantly or eliminated entirely and live a relatively normal life and live to their full potential. That is, of course, if they live in the right country. So the takeaway here is that epilepsy is relatively straightforward to diagnose, and actually it can be very successfully treated the majority of the time. However, again, if you happen to have epilepsy and you live in a low or middle income country, the likelihood, according to the World Health Organization, that you'll be diagnosed and treated with epilepsy is only about 25%. 75% of the people go undiagnosed and untreated. And that's when we started to research these social enterprise models and found the Tyndale House Publishing model and established our own version of what we call Social Enterprise 2.0. We believe, as an organization, it says a lot about us as a human race. If cures or effective treatments for diseases or disorders are available, and we choose consciously or unconsciously not to deliver them to everyone in need. So, as we wrap up, I want to end where I started. What's your cause? What's your calling? And what's your passion? And how do you want to attack it? There are some very important questions you need to ask yourself about how you want to structure your organization, especially if it's a social enterprise. And one of the things you need to consider, you first look into your heart and determine what your intent is. And then look at your exit strategy, because your exit strategy is going to have a huge impact on the success of your organization. And it absolutely is going to determine whether it is sustainable, scalable, and it's going to impact your lifelong legacy. Thank you.